Good morning, everyone. We continue with Macbeth, this time Act 3, Scene 1, and this is the first part, lines 1 to 71. Please remember to have your texts with you so that you are able to follow all the time. You don't have to refer back to previous frames. We start this scene and it takes place, it is set in Forres, the king's castle. Now remember that Macbeth and Banquo were summoned by King Duncan to go to Forres. That was now after Macbeth had been named Thane of Cawdor and before King Duncan announced that he would spend the night with the Macbeths in Inverness. Banquo is alone on stage. He enters rather, and he's alone on stage when he starts speaking. So this is another example of a soliloquy. He speaks to Macbeth, even though Macbeth is not there. Thou hast it now, King, Cawdor, Glamis, all as the weird women promised, and I fear thou playedst most foully for it. Yet it was said, it should not stand in thy posterity, but that myself should be the root and father of many kings. If there come truth from them, as upon thee, Macbeth, their speeches shine, why, by the verities on thee made good, may they not be my oracles as well, and set me up in hope? But hush, no more. At this point in the play, Macbeth was crowned as King of Scotland at the coronation at Scone a few weeks earlier already. He now occupies Duncan's throne in Forres. Forres is situated in the north of Scotland, approximately 25 miles or 40 kilometers northeast of Inverness, Macbeth's castle. Banquo enters the stage alone. He addresses Macbeth, so therefore this is apostrophe. Banquo links all that Macbeth has now become to the witches' prophecies. The titles Glamis, first of all, he inherited, Cawdor, that he was given by the king, as well as the kingship. Banquo suspects that Macbeth acted in a wicked way. He played foully to get it. Remember, Banquo is the only one, apart from the Macbeths, who knows about the witches' prophecies. We regard Banquo as an honourable man, yet he does not reveal his suspicion of Macbeth. He keeps quiet about it. He attended the coronation. Thus, it seems as though he supports Macbeth as king. Banquo has thus also been influenced by the witches. He recalls that by implication, the witches implied that Macbeth's descendants would not become king after him. Banquo himself would be the root, the origin of a line of kings, like a family tree. If Macbeth's kingship is the result of the witches' prophecies, then it may be that their prophecies for him will also be realized. The verities or the truths of their statements may prove to be the truth for him too. If we look at the word veritas, it comes from veritas in Latin, which means truth. We also use it quite frequently when we speak about having to verify information. In other words, when we want to say that we want to establish the truth of the information. In a rhetorical question, he asks if they may therefore give him hope for the future of his children as well. So indirectly, Banquo may also benefit from Macbeth's evil deed. Perhaps the reason why he does not reveal the witch's prophecy and the possibility of Macbeth having committed the murder. Lines 11 to 18. A senator sounded, enter Macbeth as king, Lady Macbeth as the queen, Lennox, Ross, lords, ladies, other attendants. Macbeth notices Banquo. Here's our chief guest. If he had been forgotten, it had been as a gap in our great feast, and all thing unbecoming. Tonight we hold a solemn supper, sir, and I'll request your presence. Let your highness command upon me, to the which my duties are with a most indissoluble tie for ever knit. A sonnet is played on the trumpet. It is a particular set of notes to announce the arrival of the king and his entourage. This is the first time that we see the Macbeths as king and queen. When Macbeth sees Banquo, he announces him to be their chief guest at a banquet which they will be holding that night. He's supported in this show of honour to Banquo by Lady Macbeth, who says if he had not been invited, it would have been totally or wholly unsuitable. But now remember, here then the condition is fulfilled. He has been invited. Macbeth states that it is a solemn, formal, ceremonious supper. This gives it the air of an official gathering. Banquo, upon being invited and honoured in this manner, declares his loyalty to and support of Macbeth as the sovereign or sole ruler. Macbeth may give him any command, and he declares that his loyalty is tied to Macbeth with an indissoluble tie. Soluble means that it can be dissolved. Indissoluble, it cannot be dissolved or destroyed. But does he really mean it? He uses very formal language. Does he say this merely for the show? Let us read lines 18 to 28. Macbeth again starts speaking. Write you this afternoon? Aye, my good lord. We should have else desired your good advice, which still hath been both grave and prosperous in this day's council, but we'll take tomorrow. Is it far you ride? As far, my lord, as will fill up the time twixt this and supper. Go not my horse the better, I must become a borrower of the night for a dark hour or twain. Fail not our feast. My lord, I will not. Macbeth adds a question as a casual afterthought. Is Banquo leaving the castle grounds that afternoon? He asks this on the pretext that he just wants to know if Banquo will be available for a meeting with Macbeth, because he would like to ask Banquo his valued opinion on a few matters of state. Banquo's advice has always been wise and serious, grave and profitable, prosperous. As Banquo is going for a horseback ride, they will then rather meet the next day. He also tries to establish whether Banquo will be long gone from the castle. Is it far you ride? Macbeth tries to give a display of honour and loyalty to Banquo, to preempt having himself suspected of the murder of Banquo, which he is planning at this stage. If he arranges a meeting for the next day quite publicly, then surely he cannot be guilty of planning and executing his murder today. At the same time, he wants to know for which time the murder may be arranged. Banquo reveals that his journey will take up all the time between the present and the supper or the banquet. He might have to ride a few hours into the night if his horse is slow. Macbeth warns him not to omit to leave out coming to the banquet, and Banquo promises, "I will," that he will attend the banquet. Let's read lines 29 to 44. Macbeth speaking. "We hear our bloody cousins are bestowed in England and in Ireland, not confessing their cruel parricide, filling their hearers with strange invention. But of that tomorrow, when therewithal we shall have cause of state craving us jointly. Hie you to horse, adieu till you return at night. Goes Fleance with you?" "Aye, my good lord, our time does call upon us." "I wish your horses swift and sure of foot, and so I do commend you to their backs. Farewell." Banquo leaves, exits. "Let every man be master of his time till 7 at night. To make society the sweeter welcome, we will keep ourselves till supper time alone. While then, God be with you." Exeunt all but Macbeth and an attendant. Macbeth now shares some information with Banquo. Apparently, they receive constant reports from the English court. He reports that Malcolm and Donalbain, the bloody cousins, are now in England and in Ireland respectively. Why are they called bloody cousins? Remember, they're related to Macbeth, and bloody because their hands are steeped in blood, according to Macbeth's lies that he tries to spread. He says that they do not confess that they are guilty of murdering their own father, of committing parricide, or as we would say, patricide, which is the word for killing of a father. Instead, they invent stories, they make up stories in which the blame for the deed is placed on someone else. It seems as though Macbeth knows they are blaming him, but he wants to create the impression that these are mere fantasies and that they are just doing that to cover up their own guilt. He says, however, they will talk about it on the following day, when they will discuss matters of state that concern them both. He tells him to go quickly to his horse. He then casually asks a question. He wants to know if Fleance, Banquo's son, is going with him. It may look like a casual question, but the answer is of the utmost importance to Macbeth. If he has killed Banquo and Fleance escapes, Banquo's bloodline may continue and his descendants may be kings, thus preventing Macbeth's descendants from being kings. By stopping the bloodline, he tries to block the witch's prophecies. Banquo states it is time for them to leave. Macbeth wishes them a safe journey. His horses must travel quickly and place their feet securely, again creating an impression that he truly cares for their well-being. When Banquo leaves, Macbeth turns to the rest of the people present and dismisses them. He tells them to return at 7 o'clock, and he himself will spend the time till then alone so that he can be better company. He uses the royal plural. We will keep ourselves alone. He then turns to the servant standing with him. Lines 44 to 56. Macbeth speaking. Sarah, a word with you. Attend those men our pleasure. They are, my lord, without the palace gate. Bring them before us. Exit attendant. To be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus. Our fears in Banquo stick deep, and in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared. It is much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind, he hath a wisdom that doth guide his valour to act in safety. There's none but he whose being I do fear, and under him my genius is rebuked, as it is said, Mark Antony's was by Caesar. Macbeth turns to the servant and asks if the men are still waiting for him to see them. So obviously he has made an arrangement before this whole conversation with the servant, upon which the servant informs him they are waiting outside the castle walls, and then Macbeth tells the servant to summon them. In a long soliloquy, Macbeth expresses his dissatisfaction with what he has achieved. I mean, this is only a few weeks into the kingship, you know. To be king means nothing to him, as his kingship is not safe. He's disillusioned. He murdered Duncan for the sake of Banquo's children. That is all it has come to. Macbeth presents his reasons for wanting Banquo dead. He describes him as a worthy opponent. He recognizes and admires his formidable qualities. Banquo is described as a man of regal qualities, royal, kingly qualities. I think this helps Macbeth to convince himself that Banquo is a threat and that he is indeed a person of noble birth and he has to be killed. The following qualities are discussed. First, Banquo is brave. He's daring. His spirit is not intimidated. He's undaunted. He is wise. Added to that, he does not just rush in because he has courage to do something. His courage is controlled, tempered by his wisdom, so that he acts in safety. His more moderate behavior ensures that he can act in safety. Macbeth says that he fears no other person's existence is being like Banquo's. He uses an image that goes back to their belief that every man was born with a guardian spirit, an angel, a genius. He says Banquo's spirit is stronger than his, Macbeth's. This spirit scolds, rebukes Macbeth's guardian spirit, so that that spirit becomes fearful. Macbeth draws a parallel between himself and Mark Antony. Mark Antony was Julius Caesar's best friend, and he states that, by implication, Mark Antony had wonderful qualities, but his spirit was subdued by Julius Caesar, so he could not become as important as Julius Caesar, even though he himself was a masterful general. Now he goes back to Banquo's behavior at the time of the witches' prophecies. I hope you can remember that well enough. The witches first gave Macbeth a prophecy, and then Banquo challenged him for a prophecy himself. He says Banquo scolded the sister and demanded the prophecy for himself. Like prophets, they then announced that Banquo would be father to a line of kings. Thus, Macbeth's sons will not succeed him in the kingship. This is the reason for Macbeth's dissatisfaction. No son of his will become king. The crown the witches placed on his head is infertile. The scepter they placed in his hand is barren. These, the scepter and the crown, are symbols of kingship. A hand that is not from his bloodline will force the scepter from his grip. In other words, Macbeth went out, killed Duncan, and as a result earned damnation of his soul for the sake of Banquo's children. He defiled, dirtied, made his mind unholy for the sake of Banquo's children. He emphasizes the fact that there was actually no reason to kill Duncan, as Duncan had good qualities. He was gracious. Macbeth created bitterness where there used to be peace. He put hatred and rancors in his cup. He uses a metaphor of an everlasting, eternal jewel, something precious, to show how precious his soul is, which he gave to the common enemy of man, which is Satan. And that now means it was for the sake of Banquo's children. I just think if he had thought about this before killing Duncan, he might have held back. I have to explain the next image to you with reference to the games they hosted in medieval times. The area where knights jousted was known as the lists, It was roughly rectangular in shape, and it was usually spread with sand or straw. The length of the field was about 100 to 200 meters. Now, Macbeth, in the next image, challenges fate to come into the list, into that area, to fight against him, to see who would be the champion. He is trying to cheat fate so that his children could continue the line of kings. This is now the first part of Act 3, Scene 1. We will continue with the rest shortly. Good day to you all. May you have a wonderful day.